This week, we welcome Jonathan Gohstand, HP Inc.'s Director of Security, Product Marketing, to discuss how endpoint isolation can solve hybrid and remote work challenges. In the Leadership and Communication section, tech leaders must raise awareness and build trust to close the cybersecurity gap. 600,000 U.S. cybersecurity jobs sit empty, and the highest cybersecurity retention difficulties in years, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. It's time to rethink how we approach cybersecurity because the reality is modern cyber attackers are already past your initial defenses. ExtraHop helps your security team find and eradicate advanced threats before real damage is done. Protect your enterprise and customers with better defense. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops advanced threats at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP. Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode 257, recorded April 4th, 2022. I'm your host, Jason Albuquerque, sitting in for Matt. He's doing the big move. He'll be back next week, but I'm joined remotely by my esteemed co-host. First, Mr. Ben Carr. How we doing, Ben?
Hey, how's it going?
It's pretty cool being in the helm here today. Not too bad.
Yeah,
not too bad.
Yeah, driving the ship, as it were, right?
That's it. You know, we were talking earlier. I've been doing this long enough. I should know how it goes, right? So why not? And second, my second co-host, Tyler Robinson. How's it going, Tyler? You're becoming a staple here, buddy. I love seeing you.
I know. It's great to be here, and happy birthday to Ben. You know, don't want to call you out and dox you on air, but you know, it's not hard to find. I looked it up already.
We're gonna sing happy birthday in the second segment, but hey, you know what? Happy birthday, buddy.
Yeah, a lot of gray hair.
Join us April 14th to learn how to monitor your Wi-Fi network for attacks with Enzyme, a free and open source wireless intrusion detection system with Leonard Koopman, hosted by Larry Pesce and Paul Asadorian. Then join Alan Stasakakis and host Tyler Robinson and Paul Asadorian on April 21st to learn how to gain visibility into your enterprise with Sysmon. Live attendees at both of these webcasts will have a chance to win a $100 Hacker Warehouse gift card. Register at securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. This segment is sponsored by HP Wolf Security. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/HPWolf. Jonathan Gohstand is HP Inc.'s Director of Security Product Marketing, which includes sales enablement and channel programs. He has over 20 years experience in cybersecurity, primarily on the product marketing and product management roles. He started his career on the customer side, working for Chevron internationally, managed an IT reseller in Europe, and in the 90s, he helped build out Cisco security business as Director of Product Management. His career includes a cybersecurity startup, consulting for over a dozen companies, including Checkpoint, VMware, McAfee, and numerous startups. Jonathan lives in San Francisco and enjoys running, reading, and kayaking in his spare time. Jonathan, welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's great to have you.
What is up? Thanks for the invite. How you doing?
Yeah, we're doing well. So just to kind of kick off here, the way we're working today is different, right? It's different. It's become more complex. It's distributed. It's been an incredible challenge for IT professionals and security leaders. We're in a place where we can work from anywhere, anytime, with any device. Why don't you give us a quick intro and overview about how HP Wolf Security is tackling this hybrid and remote workforce and all the challenges that come with it?
Yeah, sure. I'll just give like a quick overview and get more into the discussion. So basically, from our perspective, the endpoint is like the key battleground when it comes to security, right? As people have gone, obviously, cloud was going on for years. Remote was starting to be a thing. Now it's a major thing. So from the security architecture perspective, you don't have a lot of common touch points left to apply controls, right? So, okay, you can put controls on the cloud apps, but now they're all different and you still have on-prem stuff. Obviously, anything inside the data center is limited to that. Network controls, well, good luck with that because now everybody's remoting and half the stuff's in the cloud anyway. So the endpoint's kind of the one remaining place where you can plan a consistent set of security controls. And so, it's always been a big battleground. Frankly, there's a lot of vendors been participating in that space. It's just more and more of the same. So from our perspective, what we need to do is up our game with respect to capabilities on the machine. Starting down, you normally say starting down at hardware, but it's not just at hardware. I mean, starting back with, say, factory services. I mean, obviously, the value is moving up towards data and applications. Everybody knows that. Hardware, what's that? But if you're the ones making the hardware and you're able to, say, pre-provision certificates, secrets, autopilot keys before you even ship the unit, you're adding a lot of value right out of the box. And from there, you build up to the firmware and then above the operating system with the endpoint isolation from our Bromium acquisition. So we're trying to build that sort of full stack security from factory services up above the operating system.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I mean, honestly, over so much time with the hybrid workforce in place, IT leaders were so focused on improving employee experience with that distributed workforce, reconfiguring their workspaces and making it so, that remote and hybrid workforce could work more effectively, building better collaboration opportunities. But focus on security seemed to be an afterthought, right? And now having these tools is a great benefit. So, how do we balance that enablement of users with keeping those security measures in place? And how is HP Wolf helping with that, to really keep our cybersecurity posture up in a situation where, we're evolving on the day-to-day with our hybrid workforce. We're changing. I mean, my company is constantly changing our positioning on, how we're working in this hybrid environment and really changing with the staff needs and how they want to work. So how is HP Wolf helping with that?
I mean, the way we look at it is you can only do so much on the endpoint. I mean, I was just covering a trade show in Atlanta last week, Dallas 2 weeks before that, Seattle week before that. You hear a lot of the same kind of things, like don't give me more tools, don't give me more work, blah blah. Yeah. So you have this basically this tension, right? On the one hand, I don't want anything else on the endpoint. On the other hand, the vast majority of attacks are successful leveraging what's going on in the endpoint and the fact that you're interfacing with users, right? They use social engineering techniques, phishing, ransomware, the common threads we already hear. So on the one hand, I don't want to put anything more on there. On the other hand, that's where I'm getting hacked. And that's where my concern is. So what do I do? So the way we try to approach this was what we'll do is we'll focus on operational efficiency. It isn't so much like the number of tools you have on there. Like that's sort of an issue. The issue is how much work is each one. I mean, obviously you have to be careful of things of like, well, are any of them big performance hits or do they argue with each other? But aside from that, it's really operational efficiency, which is key. And in the lead in, you spoke about those 600,000 open jobs, right? So we just don't have the horsepower to do it. You can outsource to managed services partners, and a lot of people are doing that, but being very effective is frankly a challenge with those. I've got interesting anecdotes there. So our idea is to try to be as efficient as possible with what goes on the endpoint. And I can talk you through some of that through the
that'd be interesting because the first thing that my security team would say is there going to be another agent on the endpoint, right? So talk to me a little bit about that architecture. That efficient protection. What is that? Is it an agent? How is that built in?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Jason,
so
just to jump in
basically,
real quick, I echo that same thing, right? For me, it's not necessarily, I think, you highlighted earlier, it's not necessarily the fact that there's an agent, right? I mean, people use that as a euphemism for how much load does this add to the system? How much overhead is the work? Well, how's this
yeah,
going to fit into an automation play for us? And how do we actually operationalize and take use of this data in amongst all the other tools? So given that context,
exactly.
I think that's probably where you're
Yeah.
headed, but I'd like to understand that perspective.
Absolutely, that makes total sense. And so basically, the approach to this isolation thing, the way to think about it is, so it is absolutely agent software, and what it does is it basically isolates each task that's potentially malicious using a concept we call micro virtualization. So you got to remember, the folks who started Bromium, they originally did the Zen hypervisor, and then they moved into Bromium to put it on the endpoint. And so what happens is let's say you're opening up a Word file, an attachment, a PDF, these kind of things that could potentially compromise the machine. They build out this micro virtual machine in real time. They basically clone the operating system and for example, Word, the application that's running on the machine, and they dump the instance inside that micro virtual machine. And so what that gives you is it gives you a very, very small attack surface. It basically allows the user to keep using, let's say, the document the way they intended to, but prevents the malware from escaping the micro VM. And what's critical to note is that it's enforced by CPU constructs built into the Intel and AMD CPUs. Basically, any business class CPU built in the last 4 years supports this technology. Bromium worked with those CPU vendors to develop these primitives on the CPU. And what that does is it gives you two things. It gives you very, very strong protection. Malware, software-based malware can't get around it. And it still allows you to deliver high performance because you're using the CPU hardware to accelerate the whole thing. All right. So the key element is this micro virtualization. I hate to bring in the term zero trust because everybody's just looking for an excuse to say zero trust. It drives me
No,
nuts.
not zero trust again.
Not zero trust. Read this 800-207. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
But I can actually make a credible argument for it's actually relevant because the idea is, as things come in, we just open them in micro VMs because we don't trust any of them. And the critical thing is we're not trying to detect anything, right? We're moving beyond EDR and trying to say, oh, I think this is malicious, therefore I send an alert, therefore I have to correlate an alert. And frankly, whether it's via AI or manual, whatever, it's still extra work, extra chances for mistakes. And then I have to come back in for an analysis and a remediation, and then I got to close out the ticket. Oh, maybe I'll automate it with SOAR, and it'll be a little faster in some cases. Wow, right? It's just, no, I'm just going to isolate it. When the task is over, person closes out the task, boom, it's off the machine. So it absolutely
it's almost like
lowers,
containerizing that task, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we get into these debates internally, like, oh, do we use the word containers? Because it's a container. Yeah. Oh, but then they'll think, oh, containers over in the Linux world, and like, oh, that's a data center thing. So, but yeah, if you understand what we're talking about, it's containerizing each one.
How does this?
And one thing that's also interesting is the visibility. Is what's interesting is, everybody wants visibility. My experience with security people, everybody wants visibility. They struggle to budget for it. Like, hey, boss, can I have another visibility tool? No, get back to work. What this does is, in the process of encapsulating each one, we're doing the inspection of what's going on because you've basically built the micro VM. So you see everything that the software inside is doing. So we capture all that information, we put it up into a cloud data lake, and because the execution environment exactly represents the actual execution environment, the same version of the operating system, you get this great forensics information and alerting if we see something malicious, so you know what's going on. But the alert's a low priority alert because you're protected anyway by the micro VM. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, the visibility and the protection.
How does this
Tyler, you got a question?
Yeah, how does this play into things like network files? If you're protecting against something like ransomware or a worm, something spreading across your file shares or doing enumeration on your network, how does this isolate and still allow the interoperability of client applications to data that lives inside the environment, or web applications that are maybe making API calls or hooks into a shared resource? All of these things that are kind of like the new generation of how companies have to operate with the shared data model and all these databases. How does this kind of correlate and interact with those and still allow the segmentation and micro segmentation?
What we try to do is we try to focus on the environment that the malware is going to execute on the machine, and not how it got there. So I'll give you a specific example. Like what most people do with their machines, I do, is to use it for both corporate and for personal tasks, right? So sure, you can have email gateways for your corporate email and secure web gateways and cloud this, that, and all that. But if the attack vector is the file is delivered via Gmail, all bets are off, right? So from our perspective, it's all the same. What we care about is the malware was conveyed in a particular vehicle that requires a particular application and user interaction in order to start doing its thing. So whether it was delivered via a share or something isn't really the issue. When we look at our metrics for how malware is being delivered, we're looking at those applications. So interestingly enough, it used to be most of them were spreadsheets last year, for example. For some reason, spreadsheets were hot as a vehicle, and then it pivoted back to Word, which was where it was at before. So the common denominator tends to be the application that's executing on the endpoint.
So, as someone who sat in the CIO seat, who had the purse strings and had to make the investment, right? Well, what's the minimal point of entry here, right? Does this come standard with HP products? Is this something that can work across my entire stack, where it's not just HP centric? Where do we begin here with the point of entry?
Yeah, so it cut it in two. So the things I talked about before, the factory services, like the firmware configuration protections, this sort of thing, all of that clearly is specific to HP hardware, right? When you get into the SureClick products, which is the Bromium products with the endpoint isolation, those products only have a dependency on the operating systems, Windows, which is where the attacks tend to function, and those CPUs. So it is not specific to HP hardware. You've got competing hardware, PCs, no problem. And I mean, when I was doing a trade show actually in Seattle, that came up. Gentleman using sort of standard AV, one of the big names you've heard out there, wasn't catching everything. He would do his scans, doesn't show everything. He was interested in working with us, and the first thing he said is, well, I'm in the middle of migration away from another vendor to HP, so I've got a mixed fleet. What can you do for me? And it's like, no problem, we can support them. It's just having the reasonable. If you have really old machines, that's where it's not going to work. Yeah. But if the machines were purchased, say 2017, 2018 or after, you should be golden.
Oh, that's good. So subscription model, if you want to bring this across your entire stack and then start working your way toward bringing in native HP products, and you just basically buy a subscription for your endpoints, right?
Yeah, it's just based on endpoint. So obviously, we totally get it. You want to try it first. Anything on the endpoint, obviously, you're crazy if you just roll it out. I mean, nobody does that. So we absolutely would encourage you just do a POC on your on your IT staff or whoever you can find. See how it's working for you, and then move from there. And in terms of justifying it, there's a couple of things. The main one is this, as far as I'm concerned, is this whole efficiency. We're going to basically lower the workload for your SOC. And everybody's cool with that, right? Because where does the SOC spend most of its time? It's the user-centric, the device-centric alerts that are coming in from your endpoint fleet, right? It's not what's going on in the data center on the network side. It's the endpoint. That's the first one. The other one I think is really interesting, though, is refactoring security awareness. So everybody's, doing SAT because you got to train people to spot phishing and spot ransomware. It's a standard control. They get, an hour every 6 months or whatever you can get. But trying to teach people to be human phishing detectors is kind of a losing battle. Like, I get why you do it. It makes sense. But, people are going to make mistakes. They're going to be tired. They're going to click on the wrong thing. Bad guys only got to be correct once, the usual cliches. Like, forget about that. Just let them keep using their documents the way they do, take the pressure off of them, and instead refactor that awareness training into things that frankly have more value, like maybe social media etiquette, right? You see people using their fat thumbs to make huge mistakes. Maybe a little more time spent there is better use of time.
You talked about a little bit about the efficiencies that you can bring to the SOC. I'm assuming the product allows for log sources to be shipped over to the SOC, so they can get that visibility into their SIM and be able to analyze logs from there.
Yep, it's the usual stuff. We imports into SIM. We also do support Stix taxi feed. So, what we like to say is, of course, you want the visibility into the SIM, and that's fine. And we absolutely provide that. We also provide the ability to have what we call a threat intelligence report. So anything that we thought was malicious. So, for example, Word documents shouldn't be writing to firmware. We're gathering this full forensics detail, which process is called which, network, everything, you name it, it's in there. And that package is available to the security analyst if they want to delve into what's been going on inside the endpoints. The other thing you can potentially do is you can take that Stix taxi data and you could feed it into a tip or something like that and say, well, you know what, I'm going to maybe tune some of my policies on the rest of my security architecture to block this in other places if you want. So there's a few ways to slice and dice that information.
Very good. I mean, I sit back and I say to myself, this looks like a huge value add to an organization. And I'm sure verticals are jumping at trying to do proof of concepts and jumping on the capability. Are you seeing any trends in certain verticals? I would see maybe DoD would want to jump on this, public sector, healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing from trends kind of jumping on this strategy?
I mean, the reality is, like, below the operating system, there's certain verticals who care a lot. So, for example, like supply chain, okay, that's a government thing, right? They've always cared about it. They still do. Once you go above the operating system, I tell you, like, I thought it was really funny. And these trade shows, it's great to be out talking to people in person, random people, just getting a feel for what's concerning them. And I'm telling you, like, it's a broken record. I'm dating myself with records, but it's the same, like, I'm worried I'm going to get popped. We were actually drinking at the bar in Seattle, and this guy who's a great cybersecurity expert, fantastic guy, he goes, oh, I couldn't help overhearing. We started talking to him, and he's like, look, I'm going to get popped because, some salesperson is going to click on the wrong thing. So it's all about phishing ransomware. So the bottom line in it is, no, it's all about the same. I wish I could make something up, but it's not true.
No, that's good.
There is one other thing that's interesting that we haven't talked about, but I think it's actually quite interesting that we're just bringing to market now, and that is to take this isolation technology and flip it on its head. And the application for what I'm talking about is privileged user activity, right? So I'm an admin, I'm remote, I'm opening up RDP or ICA sessions into sensitive equipment or backend databases or cloud, whatever it is, with a web portal, and I'm doing sensitive stuff. And obviously, I need to have additional controls on that privileged user activity. That's always been well known. If you look at compliance regimens, they always have privileged user activity as a key additional control. So what we can do is we can take that isolation and we can take that known good, let's say RDP session, and we can encapsulate it in one of these micro VMs. But the policy is written to keep everything else away from that VM. In other words, I know this thing is good and everything around me is potentially bad, even including the machine itself. So I can protect that privileged activity, and that's a great additional control over, if you're using privileged account management, from one of the big players there, that's handling the cred management and the logging. It's not handling what's going on the machine. So they work very well together.
Does that mean that it keeps the credentials out of memory on the base operating machine, where those are just getting passed to the micro? I'm assuming you guys are using VTA or VT technology.
Yeah, it's VTX based, and so yeah, absolutely. What it's doing is it's keeping that highly sensitive information in this encapsulated encrypted space. So yeah, so if there's stuff swimming around on the endpoint, it absolutely can't get to it. A related thing you can use the base isolation for is a compensating control for patching. So I was talking to guy at the trade show. I said, how often do you patch? He goes, well, we try to do scans on the endpoints every 30 days, and it's 3 months to patch once we find something. But if something's brought to our attention proactively, then we try to patch in 30 days. Well, it's like, well, what do you do between the patch cycles, right? It's kind of like the old database firewall model to put something in front of the database because you can only patch Oracle twice a year or something. Same thing, you can use this as a compensating control for patching between those patch cycles.
So, Jonathan, HP has really been stepping up their game in the security side, right? Acquiring Bromium, having the HP Wolf focus on, security campaigns and a high focus on security. What's the future of what HP is going to bring to the table? What's a little bit of a roadmap that you can share with us?
I think, to be honest, just getting people to adopt what we have is, I think, the initial challenge is going to keep us busy real fast. I mean, definitely we could do more in terms of providing that visibility in lots of different ways, slicing and dicing it for different personas, this kind of thing. Other operating systems get brought up. But fundamentally, there's just a latent need to really double down on the endpoint for full stack security solution. And also, I think there's real opportunity, and this is where HP has a unique differentiator, is just like, okay, we sell through IT people. I mean, we sell hardware to IT people. That is the company's bread and butter, and it extends to the print side too. It's not just PCs. So there's a lot of things we do down on the machines that help both IT and security. So, you want to move to Intune Modern Management? Well, then, okay, let me help you pre-populate the autopilot stuff. Or I want to have an onboard protected space to have a base operating system. So if something goes wrong and the machine's compromised or it's a weird thing, there's some sequence I can do or QR code where I can instantly at least recover the machine enough to then rebuild it over that. Right? Or I lose the machine. So, okay, I want the ability to find out where it is, lock it, erase it, based on the wireless LAN that's built in. These are the kinds of things that where we have this unique differentiator because we're the hardware, that, okay, a hunk of software you put on the machine is just going to struggle to do any of that. And I think that's really where the focus is going to be.
Very good. All right, Jonathan, well, thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly. If you want to learn more about HP Wolf Security on how to protect your endpoints, please visit securityweekly.com/HP Wolf. We will take a short break and then cover the leadership and communication articles for this week.